tal, gente? Muy buenas noches. My name is Rodrigo Garcia. I am the Artistic Director of Teatro Visión and your host for tonight. Bienvenidos a La Hora del Mitote. We thank you for joining us tonight. La Hora del Mitote se transmite cada viernes a las 7 por nuestra página de Facebook y en nuestro canal de YouTube, as well as on channel 30th for Create TV. We are very happy to have you tonight. We invite you to participate by sending us your questions and comments. And I would like to start off by acknowledging that we are guests here on the ancestral homeland of the Muwekma Ohlone people who continue to live and thrive in our local community today. Me gustaría comenzar reconociendo que somos huéspedes aquí en la tierra ancestral del pueblo Muwekma Ohlone que continúa viviendo y prosperando en nuestra comunidad local hoy. And tonight, just like every Friday, well, not every Friday, now we are going every other Friday, we have a very special guest, someone whose work I admire, and we're delighted to have him tonight. He is playwright Gabriel Jason Dean, who is an award-winning playwright and screenwriter whose critically acclaimed plays for children and adults include In Bloom, Qualities of Starlight, Terminus, Heartland, Entangled, The Transition of Doodle Pequeño, which we produced, and others. He also has written books and lyrics for the musicals Mario and the Comet and Our New Town. And his screenplays include Get Gomez with Cranium Entertainment, PIGSKIN and D'ANGELICO, with on DEPLORABLE. I'm doing all the TV pilots. We Belong, Deplorable, RABBLE, and an animated series, Tenderfoot. Gabriel, thank you for being with us tonight. You are joining us from New York, and I know that you folks are having some quite adventure over there. How are you doing tonight?
Great. I'm now that the tech is working, I am good. I was a nervous wreck prior to that, but I'm so pleased to be here and sharing the space with you tonight, Rodrigo. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, I guess we haven't talked since we were talking about the transition of Doodle Pequeño, which was over 2 years ago.
Feels like decades ago.
Yeah, and a lot has happened. And I want us to talk a lot about your new project, which I'm fascinated by it. Fascinated, and I just don't know where to start. But I guess to start, warming up, and so people can know more about you. Can you tell us about where do you draw inspiration to create the work that you do?
Yeah, it's I love this question because it's difficult to answer. Like any good question, it's not easy. It doesn't have an easy answer. It's always personal. It always has to be personal in some way. Screenplays are like marriages. You're with them for a long, long time, really the rest of your life. And, I've found I'm not you see it's gray hair. I'm not a young Turk anymore. I found as I've gotten older that it has to really be something personal for me. I have to identify with it somehow, some way. And as you know, Rodrigo, I've written outside of my own, identity and cultural experience a good bit. But even in doing that, there's always something personal, within it, whether it's a theme, whether it's a particular character, whether it's in some cases, a location, something that really resonates and will get me through the long distance of that relationship that I'm going to have with the play for a long period of time. So, that's the broad answer. Telescoping in, I find myself most inspired by my collaborators in the room. And, well, I shouldn't say in the room. I should say my collaborators, the people who I've worked with consistently over the past, decade. Now I'm starting to really make things with those people in mind, and specifically actors and directors, and thinking about how my strengths and their strengths can really, you know, marry together toward, I'm in a marriage metaphor tonight. I don't know what that is. really married to bring those skill sets together to tell the best story we can. You know, before that though, it was always, I would seek inspiration from other artists, even before it was like the artists in the room with me. I mean, I say this, and I say it with full sincerity, that theater saved my life. And you know, as a high schooler, well, I mean, you know Rift. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So you get a little taste of my you know, my life then. If I hadn't met a man named Troy Beasley, who was my high school theater director, I don't know where I'd be today, honestly, you know. So I drew inspiration from those artists that I encountered. And it wasn't just theater artists. I mean, like, James Baldwin has had a huge impact on, I know he's like in the zeitgeist now. So it's like cool to say James Baldwin. But like, Troy Beasley, my high school theater director, introduced me to James Baldwin when I was 16 years old. And that, you know, I was living in a 96% white town in North Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, if that tells you anything. And to, you know, be introduced to the mind of James Baldwin at that age, it changed the course of my life forever, you know. And you get a taste of that early on, and you just want more. So I look to other artists for inspiration. Always. It's always been true.
Something that you were saying about your work in developing these marriages with your work. Tell us about your closest relationship you've had in terms of your work.
In life or to work?
Into work, in you know, the works that you've created. What has been the one that, you know, you still hold you to your heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard not to say the current thing that I'm working on. I mean, that's immediately what I thought, which is Rift. You know, that one is the most personal and raw and real thing I've put forward. I've always had myself embedded somewhere within, you know, my scripts. But this, there's a, and I almost didn't even call him a character. There's a character named Gabriel, you know, in that piece. And I guess I do call him a character because I'm the human being and he's the character, right? And there are certain liberties I'm taking with, you know, with the dramatic toolkit that I'm using to tell the story most effectively. But by and large, the emotional truth of it is absolutely real. And like, living in that has been exhilarating, and it's made me like kind of addicted to it. Now I'm just like, I only want to tell that level of intimate story. And I'm living in the middle of the story right now. I mean, as we talk, you know, you're anxiously awaiting part 2, which is coming very soon, and 3, which is coming next year. But, you know, it's hard not to say that one. And I know we're going to talk about it, but prior to that, probably my most personal piece was Qualities of Starlight, which is a play about a young astronomer and his wife who come back to the Appalachian South to deliver the news that they have been approved for adoption, pending the birth mother wants to meet the grandparents because she was raised by her grandparents. And she's like, I want to meet them. And you do whatever, you know, you drop whatever you're doing. If you're in that situation, you make it happen. So he comes back to his estranged parents to say, hey, I need you. And he finds out that they're addicted to crystal meth. And it's a comedy about addiction, which is like, unless you see it and taken out of context, people are like, what is wrong with you? Why are you writing a comedy about addiction? But that was very personal. It was based on my, you know, my relationship with my parents. I'm not an astronomer, obviously. I have not adopted any children. But, you know, there's a lot of me in that character. And it's my parents on the page. I mean, there's no, question about that. I always feel, whenever I see that play, I always feel a little embarrassed when I watch it. Not of the writing, the work I feel great and solid about, but it's always like, it's too true. It feels like, oh God, I'm telling the truth, and that's hard to bear. I lived through it once, so yeah, that gives you a sort of taste of my life and sensibility, and the personal connections that I have to the plays that I'm writing.
We produced the Transition of Doodle Pequeño, which, when I was looking for plays for our youth production, I was immediately drawn to that play because of its simplicity, but at the same time, the complexity of what it was talking about, which was gender identity and the perception of gender, right? This perception that in our society we create. How did it all come about? I know that it was a word that you developed at the Lincoln Center, right?
Kennedy Center.
Kennedy Center.
The other president.
The other president.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that development happened, and it has been produced in several places.
Yeah, it might be my most produced play. I'm not 100% sure, but it gets, schools are starting to do it more now, which is really heartwarming to me to see that high schools and middle schools starting to do it. Yeah, so that play, I was in graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin when I wrote that play. I met, she became my graduate mentor, Susan Zeeder, who is, I describe her, I don't know if she likes it that I describe her this way, but I do, the fairy godmother of theater for young audiences in America. And the reason I describe her that way is because she's got an incredibly huge collection of her own work that she's written, but she has fairy godmothered so many plays in this country, and brought so many TYA playwrights into the world. She's midwifed them, into the world. I was fortunate enough to be one of those. She at the University of Texas at Austin. So I don't think they do this anymore, but at the time, you had 3 or 4 playwrights a year, and the faculty would read everything that you would give to them for your first meeting. So I gave them 1,000 pages of text, which is really cruel in retrospect. Now that I teach, I'm like, why? I don't do that to someone. But Susan read it all, and I remember having this meeting with her, and it was before we had scheduled classes, and it was my first semester there. And she said, I want you to take my drama for youth course. And I was like, oh, Susan. I was one of those guys. I was like, I don't write for kids, I didn't say that to her because she's Susan Zeeder, so you don't say that. But I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to fit it in. And she's like, you need to do this. You need to write. You need to write a play for young audiences. And I said, well, why? She said, consciously or not, there is a child at the center of every story that I read that you gave me. And she was right. And I was like, it was a very simple thing, like you say, like sometimes the simplest things can be the most illuminating. And I realized, yeah, she's absolutely right. And knowing my own background in childhood, thinking like, oh yeah, of course I've written a child at the center, either on stage or off. And so I took it, and I was still reluctant because my relationship with theater for young audiences, this is a very long answer, Rodrigo, to your very simple question, but I have to sort of do the backstory to get to Doodle. And my relationship to theater for young audiences growing up was not great. I mean, I remember shows coming into schools, and even before I knew I was a theater person, because I would watch them and be like, this is terrible. It was all fables and moralizing and not really good production values and bad acting. And I won't throw the actors under the bus because it was bad material. you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got to undergrad that I encountered a play that shifted my entire understanding of what TYA could be, which was The Yellow Boat by David Starr. And I didn't have anything to do with the production. I just remember coming back. I had studied abroad and I came back and they were doing it and I watched and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And for those who don't know, The Yellow Boat is about, it's an autobiographical piece that David wrote about his son, Benjamin, who was a hemophiliac who had a blood transfusion and ended up contracting HIV, I believe in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. And he died of it. And it's such a powerful, empathic story. And it's for young audiences, you know. I remember watching that and just being like, my head exploding and thinking, wow, that's amazing. I didn't think about theater for young audiences very much, again, until I met Susan. I found out, totally kismet, she was the dramaturg who helped bring that play into the world with David Starr. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So I enrolled in Susan's class and I wrote the first draft of Doodle in that class. And it came from like I was saying earlier, it came from a very personal place. You know, I think it's fairly clear. I am not a Mexican person. But I grew up, as I told you when we talked about it, I grew up in my town is in North Georgia, and there's a heavy, it's the carpet capital of the world. A lot of industry there, and a lot of Mexican immigrants have come to that area, and so I ended up like learning Spanish in high school and learning it in a real way, not in just a high school way. So I worked with my dad's company to unofficially translate. I was just like a worker, but I was translating. And I was translating like from a textbook at first, and learned very quick because I got made fun of by my coworkers how to speak, you know, actual Spanish. But anyway, that's not the personal part of it. The personal part of it was my friend growing up, Mark Edwards, the character of Reno, who's the boy who wears dresses, was pretty much Mark. And I didn't actually consciously think about it at the time when I was writing it. It just kind of came out, you know, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I've written Mark into this play. And Doodle, you know, even though he's culturally different than me, I was a latchkey kid. My parents worked all the time. I was an only child till a certain point, until I discovered I had a half brother. So, you know, lonely and having to create things out of my imagination. Unfortunately, I never had a friend named Valencia who was a goat. I wish. So I made her for myself as an adult, for the child version of me. But that relationship that, you know, I had with Mark, you know, was really kind of contained in this one Halloween night in a play for young audiences. I mean, I was at one point, you know, I was his bully, and then he became my best friend because I saw the error of my ways and realized, this is crazy. This is not who I am, you know? Yeah, so that's the personal part of it. The development, so I wrote it in Texas, and I had already written a few drafts of it, but People's Light in Philadelphia officially commissioned the play even after I'd written it. And we applied to New Visions, New Voices, which is a semi-annual festival, or biannual, not semi-annual, every other year. That's biannual, right?
Biannual.
Yeah, it's like 10:30 my time, so sorry. Biannual festival for TYA, and you go and you've got, I think it's 29 hours. It's an equity contract reading to work on the play, develop it. I made some significant changes there, and then we presented it, you know, at the Kennedy Center. And then after that, Dramatic Publishing picked it up, and it was pretty great because I don't know how often this happens, but it hadn't had a real performance outside of the University of Texas. And they picked it up to publish. And so that helped it a lot, you know, get out into the world. How How did you find it? I remember you told me the story, but I can't.
I was just searching for plays for new audiences, and when I read the description, I was fascinated because, like you said, I think there are great words for plays for young audiences, but I was really looking forward to something that was more than a fable or something just cute and entertaining. I wanted to spark a conversation, and particularly among youth. And I can tell you, when we produced Doodle Pequeño, it was fantastic because in the development in the development of the play or production, we had conversations with the youth and talking about what that meant to them, what gender identity meant to them, and that opened a whole bigger conversation, so much that a couple of youth came out because of that play.
Wow.
Because they felt safe, because they found it made sense to them to talk through this play. And for me, that was fascinating, and how it was received by the audience. Adults loved it, and for kids, it was that, oh wow, I can be that one, or that sounds familiar to me. So anyway, that's also a long answer to say, I was just browsing, and when I read the description,
I'm so glad Dramatic Publishing published it so that you could find it. I mean, and I did get a chance to see, because you guys had the online version of it. I was able to see the production, and I have to tell you this story. I'm literally tearing up at what you said, because that's why you're right. That's my friend Mark is no longer with us, and he is one of the people who, he took his own life and really suffered because he never saw himself in that way. He was never validated. And so to hear you say that is just, it's incredible to hear that. And I got to see your production, and I got to watch it with my children, and that was amazing. My daughter, so my son had seen it before. He had seen it. I took him when he was maybe 3 and a half. He's a little young to see it. Still, the age of theaters are scary, just in general, because they're going to sit in the dark. So it was his first theater experience, and he loved that version of it. But this one really resonated with him. And my daughter, who's not yet 2, still runs around the house now. And this was, it was a while ago, it was months ago that was on, saying "Bafugi," Bafugi, and loves it, So that's hugely meaningful to me. So thank you for making that possible. To have that with my children is really cool.
Well, thank you too, because of that, we were able to open this conversation and have the youth just talk. I mean, we were not teaching them anything. We were just opening the space for them to express themselves, and the place served as a vehicle for them to have these conversations that they probably wouldn't had outside of that space. And so thank you, and I'm so glad that we were able to stay in contact and learn more about your work. And I now want us to talk about your new piece, but I just want to remind folks that we are here at La Hora del Mitote, and we are here every other Friday or twice a month on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and we're also broadcasting on channel 30th of Create TV. And tonight we have Gabriel Jason Dean, who is an award-winning playwright and a great human being. And thank you, Gabriel Jason.
It's because you've listened to Rift. I have these 2 identities.
So it just what you have been saying, it just keeps keeps popping in my mind, because there is so much, there is that child that you were talking about, so embedded
Yeah.
in that play. And well, people, a lot of people are not familiar with what this new play, what this new work is, and I want us to talk about. We share the information when we, uh, you know, when you invited us, and this is Rift, a play via text message, and it's a development that is happening in three phases. Tell us about Rift, how this came about, and did did the current circumstances influence that, or was this something that was happening already?
Little bit of both. So it's a how have I described it? I've sort of described it as theatrical memoir, um, and it is a story about, really, it's about me and my brother. My brother is currently incarcerated in the state of Georgia, and serving a life sentence for a murder charge. My brother is my half brother. He's 6 months older than me. And when we finally, came under the same household, we sort of felt like twins. I mean, we look a lot alike. We had a lot of the same interests. I mean, but two people couldn't be further apart in many ways. And while he's been in prison, he became, I'm ruining it for people who would tune into this, but it's okay. Spoiler alerts. He became involved with a white supremacist group. And I was very much a part of his life in his early years in prison, because no one else was. And, I felt for him. But after that, there was a break between us that lasted over a decade. And really, after 2016 and the Trump ascendancy and the open white supremacy that we started seeing in our country, it's been here since the country began, let's be real. But seeing it before that was history to me. I would watch things from the 60s and see those images and be like, that happened. I wasn't post that, obviously. I knew it was still there growing up where I grew up, but it was definitely under the radar, subculture. And so to see it come out in the open like that, I couldn't help but think about my brother, and the initial impulse had nothing to do with writing anything. It was just like, I need to be in touch with him, because if he's seeing this kind of validation in the mainstream, minimally, I just need to be another voice in his ear, as hard as that was going to be to do, I felt compelled to do that. And I thought about it for a couple of years before I did anything, because I'm not, people are always saying, you're so brave to do this. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I also am sort of like, I don't love that compliment in a way. I wish we all would just do that, have these conversations with folks in our lives and try to meet them with love rather than judgment and hatred, But that took me 2 years to get to that place, to be able to do that, and art, right? Before, it was just going to be me and just having conversations with him because he's my brother, but having the idea of making a piece of art that might communicate something, I didn't know what at the time, to other people, inspired me. Again, going back to it's the people, it's the artists, it's the art itself that inspires me. I started talking with, Ari Laura Creeth is artistic director of Loon Stage in New Jersey. They did Heartland maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. COVID has messed with my sense of time. I don't know when things happen. It was a great production. And I had been talking with her about doing some other things. We were talking about a voting rights project during the 2020 election. I didn't end up being able to be part of that, but I told her my story about my brother. And then she came back and said, write something. I'm going to commission you, write something. I want you to do this. And that was in the middle of the pandemic, So to answer your question, a very long, again, answer to your question, it definitely would, the format was influenced by it. However, I say now, sort of with grand hindsight, that like that's the perfect format for this piece, because of the way that my brother and I have had to communicate over the past 20 something years. It's been through letters, it's been through illegal text messages. I probably shouldn't say that, but it has been. And other outlets, and only recently has been through a legitimate it's called JPay, but it's like a FaceTime for prison inmates, and we can do that as often as I'm willing to pay for it, basically, unless they're on lockdown. And anyway, so that's been great to be able to like have a visual contact with him. And so the form itself, you get, you're getting snippets of text that we've sent. You're getting sometimes actual letters, sometimes letters that are coming from my memory because we couldn't find them. You're getting photographs that were sent. You're getting the story in the same way that I experienced the story. Of course, you're getting it in a compressed amount of time. It doesn't take 20 something years for you to get it. But I do stretch it out. All the timing that happens within the story is intentional. Sometimes you have to wait for a while, like you've been waiting for a long time between parts 1 and 2. That's intentional. It's meant to sort of mirror that big space that happened. And it's very unsatisfying for some of the audience. They're saying, they're letting us know. And it's also been great to see, like normally I can sit in an audience and kind of be anonymous, and if they don't know who I am, they don't know that the playwright's sitting next to them. I can sort of empathically feel what the audience is feeling. This format has allowed me to actually know in real time, what the audience is experiencing, because we're asking them to talk back to us, but also they just are, and people from really very different parts of my life on a chronological scale, childhood friends who knew us both are tuning into this, and it's wild to get their feedback. And then of course there's like fans, who don't actually know me, but just know my work, and to sort of see them in the same audience, it's crazy cool and also anxiety inducing.
Well, I can tell you that the moment I learned about this project, one thing that was fascinating for me is a lot of the work that we do involves the participation of the community. We very much value the community as a driving force in the creative process, and just knowing that there was going to be some kind of interaction with the audience, even when you don't know who's behind that text message, behind that phone, I just found it fascinating. But I want to mention I was very intrigued. However, during the peak of the pandemic, there were all these things happening on Zoom. Yeah. And there were some great things, and there were other things where I was like, why? Yeah. Why? We're using Zoom just because we cannot do live theater, but it doesn't make sense. So anyway, when I started receiving the text messages and the audio and the pictures and the letters, it all makes sense. I just couldn't imagine it any other way. And it became so intimate, as if I was watching from above as it was happening. And it was, again, fascinating. And at the same time, I felt connection with everybody else who was receiving that text message, which is weird. So I didn't feel alone. Yeah. But yet it felt extremely intimate. And of course, there was some sense of, am I supposed to be here right now? Am I supposed to be hearing this right now? Is this, and I just can tell you that I appreciate that, like opening the door and say, yeah, you're welcome to come in as I talk. with my brother, as
Yeah.
he and I share these very personal, as I, reflect on things on my past. It has been just a fascinating experience, and I'm looking forward to second part and third part, of course.
Yeah, it's going to become a lot more interactive in part two. We're just priming you. I was priming you in part one for what's to come. It's always I mean, I'll just sort of bluntly say this. So part two is it's going to ask the audience to do whatever you're comfortable with. Something that is risky. To reach out to someone with whom you have a rift. It could be political. It could be bigger than that. I mean, we all got that uncle, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, oh God, I don't really want to sit by him at Thanksgiving, But to do that, and I'm working with the dramaturg who's a real person, Natasha. She's a character in that piece, but she's also a real person. To create a rubric, to make that possible and safe for everyone to do. And for me, I often desire when I go to theater that incites something within me, like just tell me what to do. It's like I love all the complication and the gray area. I love that, but when it's about something that's like sitting right in front of us right now, sometimes I need you to tell me what to do, other than to donate money. I'm happy to donate money to something, if it's a real cause, but like, how can we as individuals start to make these changes in really meaningful ways? And I struggled a lot in the beginning of creating Rift. I was in this place of like, I don't want to ask, a lot of my collaborators are people of color, and I didn't want to ask people of color to do any emotional labor in this piece, because it's a piece about white supremacy and white people dealing with white people bullshit, and to ask a person of color to step into that space one more time and help out was like anathema to everything I wanted to do. However, I will say that in talking to collaborators of color, just talking about, the piece, I've had a lot of enthusiasm, from folks. And so I also didn't want to create just like a whites only space, with this piece. And it's like, so there's this paradox of that. I very much feel like I'm writing it for quote unquote good intentioned white people to examine their own white supremacy, like the character of Gabriel is doing in the piece as a result of having a relationship with a bowed white supremacist, having to like come up against that and examine what that looks like and what that means in our lives, like doing that for real and not just like in the safety of a theater and thinking about that, I think it's a little bit dangerous. Like, it's absolutely necessary. I mean, look at where we are right now. Look at what happened on January 6th. I feel like if we were talking about these fissures, these rifts in our in the fundamental foundations of America, those things wouldn't be happening. Like, there is what I found with my brother is that, while we disagree, and I'm not going to spoil part 3 for you because there's some cool stuff that happens and has happened as a result of this experiment. We are able to find some common ground, and it's weird for me to say that, right? I'm sitting here and I'm a left of Bernie Sanders progressive, but because we're approaching each other with love, and respect and a commitment to listen, which I just don't think is where we are right now. And that's the only way to get beyond this rift. I think it's on an individual level because I just can't, I'm like, I don't trust politicians anymore to help us with this. And, it's on an individual level. And I also, see it as a religious thing. I think our churches could pick up the I'm really getting on a pedestal here. Sorry, Rodrigo. Soapbox, but could pick up the mantle on this even more, you know. So anyway, I'll stop because I feel the soapbox getting bigger.
No, I again, you know, I wish we can talk hours about this, but something about the way you are approaching this work that I think, you know, we have to acknowledge the historical trauma that many communities have suffered. You know, and as a person of color, I can tell you that I'm always very skeptical about plays that are about the white experience because I live that every day, right? And so I don't need another part where I need to see that.
Right.
However, one of the things that I love about this new work is I think it goes beyond that and it goes to the human level. And there are parts that I think are important to highlight, as you know, the character of Gabriel, who has the privilege of being free and having this relationship with someone who's not, because of, however, you know, whatever the reason is, aside from ideologies. But that approach and that, you know, at a human level, I think that's something that I appreciate. And now when we go into ideologies, exactly, you know, when we see polar opposites and this is not about loving all white supremacists or all white folks. I think there are conditions that I think, like you said, about how do we create these bridges for communication and understanding, and that we won't have to agree completely on each other's point of view, but where do we find that common ground and that agreement on, I respect what you say, and you respect what I say, with, you know, with a clear intention. And that is hard. That is hard. It's not easy. And recognizing again, you know, the historical trauma that we all carry one way or another. So
it's been really, well, I was just going to speak to that. Like that. That's where I'm headed. I'm headed into ancestral trauma with it in part 3, and we're going to go back in time, and it's going to be a wild ride, Rodrigo.
I'm curious, Gabriel, as to in this development, and for those of us who have been part of phase 1 and will be part of phase 2 and hopefully phase 3, moving forward, you know, a few years from now, once you completed the whole project, how do you see that being reproduced somewhere else, or is this like one-time shot?
Oh no,
meaning,
I definitely don't
in
want it to
terms
be
of
that.
the experience for the audience.
Yeah, I don't want it to be a one-time thing. And I've been really cognizant of that from the outset. Like, you know, it does ask some unconventional things of theater companies, you know, to do. I mean, like, you have to have a relationship. You have to create a relationship with a texting platform. But now I know how to do that. You know, like we have a way that I can just say, here's the blueprint, go do it. You know, and it's cheap. Like this tech stuff is actually cheaper, you know, than producing a live. Well, I mean, part 3 is a live thing. It eventually will have actors on stage and bodies in space. But no, I definitely want it to go onward. I mean, this is I'm calling it the experiment at the moment because I'm living in the middle of it, right? At some point, it's not going to be an experiment anymore. You know, that's probably
exactly.
You know, I won't even say opening night. I'll say closing night of part 3. I'm sure Ari doesn't want me to change things in the middle of the production, but you know, I'll definitely have the inclination to do it. And even beyond that, you know, my hope is that that we can get, you know, second and third productions lined up pretty quickly afterwards, so that I can continue to develop the piece and get it. I mean, like, you know, I don't know if you have this experience, but I always have. I know what I want it to look like in my mind. Like, I got it. It's very clear to me, the vision of it and what I want the audience to feel. You know, it's just how we get to that, which is the writing, right? Like, that's the hard stuff. But the emotional experience and the look of it, I know very clearly. And it takes a long time to get to that spot, you know, and either developments or, you know, in this case, lucky enough to have like somebody who said, give me your first draft, we'll do it. You know, it's not the first draft. What you're getting is, you know, quite workshopped. But it's not, you know, it's certainly not the same kind of time frame that I've had for other projects, which sometimes been years before they see an audience. So yeah, I definitely want it to go onward after this, and you know, to create its own little subculture. Honestly, I mean, that's the dream, is that it becomes something. I was just talking to someone the other day about the potential of making an actual podcast out of this. You know, of like, I tell my story, and then we find people across the country, you know, who have some rift. It may not be you have a white supremacist in your house, you know, or whatever, but there's some rift, and I tell their stories or help them tell their stories, you know. So there's a lot spinning at the moment in my mind about, you know, what this will look like a few years from now.
And I'm looking at, you know, just looking at the website for Luna Stage, who's producing, who commissioned, or they commissioned this work. They're talking about for the second cohort. Is there a third cohort that people might be able to join and catch up with the first phase? Yeah,
there probably will be. I would say, I'm not sure if the Luna site says get on a waiting list now, but they're probably going to release another cohort right before we do the live. It'll be just enough time for you to listen to it in a compressed version before you come see the show and do your part 2 as well. So I would guess probably late November, December, they're going to release something, but they haven't given those dates to me. They've just been talking about it.
Okay. Yeah, on the website, I'm looking at it, and it only says sign up for the next cohort starting June 21st. So this is past.
Okay. Yeah. They are talking about doing another one now, because they also want people. We've had a lot of requests to review, you know, people who lost the thread on their phone, you know, for whatever reason, because it got old or whatever. They want to be able to, when they come see the show, they want to go back through it again. So we're gonna release it one more time. I don't know, but I can get you that information when it's available.
Please. Yes. And again, something that is very fascinating for me, it's how interactive it is, and how people are able to be part of this development. And it's just fascinating, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify that a little bit, you know, you haven't really seen much of it yet, but those responses that you were sending in, you're going to start to hear those and see those come into the production in parts 2 and definitely in part 3. It's going to impact design and maybe even speaking some of those things into the space. There's a possibility I'm going to play myself also in the production. We'll see. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I also have a new baby coming into the world in October, so that might throw a big old monkey wrench into that.
Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. Very excited. He is a third addition to the family, and a wonderful surprise, very welcome surprise. But you know, nonetheless, the other 2 were meticulously planned. So.
Beautiful. Well, Gabriel Jason, how do you usually go by? Gabriel Jason?
Just Gabriel. Yeah. A lot of people know me as Jason, though. So Rodrigo, if you call me Jason, I will answer.
Well, Gabriel, I wish we can again, and I hope I hope that we can, continue this conversation once part 2 comes up, and part 3, I'm really looking forward to it. I think all of us who were part of the first cohort were just like, when is the next coming? When is the next text coming? I seriously respect a lot, just as an artist, but as an individual, just being able to create something so personal and so profound that is just beautiful. And as an audience, I thank you very much for opening your heart and sharing your talent this way, and letting us be part of that story, be witness of that story. And I'm looking forward to part 2 and part 3. And please keep us posted on the further development of this work, and any other work that you might have. We're always looking forward to what you bring in next. Excellent. And any last words, Gabriel?
Well, just thank you to you for this opportunity and this conversation, and just to sort of like tag onto what you said, that idea of witnessing this. What I found is most powerful is that I'm putting my struggle in the public sphere, and that to say that that's powerful, to witness something that a lot of white people are struggling with, but just having a space to look at someone else dealing with it, gives you permission to do it yourself. So I hope people will sign up and see it. So thank you so much for bringing it a new audience.
Absolutely, thank you. And folks, we're talking about this play Rift by Gabriel Jason Dean. It's a play via text message, and it's produced by Luna Stage. And if you want to learn more about it, go on the website and get on their email list to get more announcement, to see how you can get how you can become part of the next cohort and the next phase. Yes. And if you want to learn more about Gabriel's work, go to his website, gabrieljasondean.com. And with that, we thank you very much again for your time tonight. I know it's already 11 o'clock for you. Luckily, it's Friday. I hope you get some good rest. And thank you. We will be looking out for anything that comes about your work. And once again, thank you for being part of La Hora del Mitote. And we look forward to our next, encuentro.
Sounds good. Hasta luego, Radio.
Hasta luego.